Hi, welcome to the third and final chapter of the top 10 Amiga games you've probably never even heard of, and in this third section we'll be taking a look at three of my favourite categories, all of which are 3D shooters or 3D versions of games. So let's check out the first one. This is Shadow of the Third Moon. Shadow of the Third Moon was released in 1997 and developed by Black Blade Software, which was another Italian company who developed Amiga games late in the Amiga's lifetime. The game certainly requires the AGA chipset or an ITG graphics card, at least 1 megabyte of chip RAM and an 030 or an 040 CPU. For this I will be using the 060. And so this is our first training mission. Let's accept that and then go on to missions, and here we can see our first target is a tank, and all we must do is to blow that thing away using our lasers, and that will serve as the first basic training mission. And so this is the screen that we'll be looking at. It's a full 3D environment, and by pressing escape there we can also change the level of detail, the panorama, the joystick controls, and a number of other essential options like the difficulty level. So all we need to do is to manoeuvre this craft. We can hold left and right, up and down on either the joystick or the mouse, and holding down the A key and the Z keys will accelerate and decelerate our craft, and so we can use joystick or mouse to pilot this craft through the valleys. And so all we need to do is track down our first target, and there it is in red on the radar there. When the target is in range we can press W, and that will lock that target on the map, and it will change from red to white, and then it will also create a reticle over that target so that we can fire in that general direction. And see, I'm doing a flyby here, and there you go. When the object is on fire it will then blow up and create a nice boom effect, and then all we need to do is to press escape to check out our mission status, and we can see it's complete, so we can then skip on to the next mission. So here it's pretty similar. We have 3 targets to get rid of, and we have to find those on the map. So let's head out there. All the landscapes are pre-rendered, so the game will load up the entire landscape into RAM to allow the player to fly around that entire level without any slowdowns or glitches, and the redraw can be set to distance or near field redraw. And you can also see, as we destroy this tank, we can press the X key to toggle our laser single fire and our dual fire. So that's the dual fire and that's the single fire, which will fire 2 bolts of energy into that thing at the same time. Slower than the dual fire, but that gets the job done. So there's 2 more enemies on that radar. Let's just scoot across and get those. You can see the landscape flows really smoothly, not as fast as it could do using the 060 processor, but this was designed for the 040, so there were limitations and frames per second limitations there. So that's the second destroyed, and on to the third guy. So the player will gain 3 types of weaponry in the game: the lasers, the rockets and the bombs. And during missions the game operates similar to Z-Wolf in the fact that there will be a lot of enemies on the map, and you must select between guns, bombs or missiles to get rid of the enemies as appropriate. So there will be a full battlefield being opened in this game in the main missions. But that's the second one of the training missions dealt with. Let's just fly over and check out this lake. Although there are no waves or beaches around this lake, you can certainly appreciate the detail that has gone into this pre-rendered landscape, and you can just imagine the mayhem when that landscape is filled to the brim with enemies. Let's skip on to our next training mission, and for this we will find 3 targets and another tank. For this we will also get to use our missiles. So as we speed on through, these are radar units, and we must take down those radar towers to complete the mission. And we can also use the numeric keypad to look around our craft, to look left and right and behind, and we can also press the enter key at any point to change to the external view, and we can pilot the thing using the third person if we choose to do that, and enter again will take us back to the cockpit view. So let's take on that mission. All we need to do is to take down these 3 towers, and the towers will take 4 hits to knock out. So at this stage we can take our time manoeuvring our craft. We will not get any firepower to dodge in these training levels, so we can just concentrate on removing those obstacles. 1, 2, and then 3. And we can just leave those to blow up behind us while we tackle the tank. And this tank will take quite a few extra missiles to blow up. These tanks are armor plated, so we must make sure that those missiles hit and that we get a good score from those, because we only have a limited supply of missiles, and if we run out then that's the game over. You'll have to do the level again. So crashing into that thing, that will now blow up. And on to the next mission. So this is the 4th training mission, and this is the last training mission I will show you on this playthrough. And this is certainly enough to get you started in this game. So in this mission we shall take on a base, and we need to employ bombs which fall down from parachutes, and if we should get on top of that enemy within a certain range, those bombs will fly forward and then drop down from the sky and destroy the target. But once again, we only have a limited number of bombs, and we have to make full use of those, otherwise that thing will remain intact and we'll have to do the level again. But Shadow of the Third Moon is certainly a deep game. It's certainly action packed in the missions. I definitely recommend that game for all you 3D fighter pilots out there. Great graphics, great sound, great playability. So on to our next game. Starfighter, Yammen's Reign was released in 1999 and developed by Epic and released through Islona. So this game is a 3D space adventure similar to perhaps Starglider 2 on the Amiga, perhaps Wing Commander as well. And in this game we get to pilot our craft in a 3D environment through space, taking on enemies and destroying ships and doing missions similar to Elite and Frontier. So this is the training section. Let's dive into the first training mission and see what this game is all about.
Training Mission 1. You will face targets that get progressively harder to kill. Avoid being shot if possible. Over time, more enemy will appear. Avoid shooting your own ships. Switch off invulnerability for quick cash bonuses.
So this is the warm-up mission. This is the first training mission, and what we must do in this section is to blow up half a dozen enemies which are flying around our vicinity. We can press escape at any point, and that will take us to our command center, which shows us the current status of the mission and the number of enemies destroyed. And so we can complete the training missions in any order, and we don't even have to complete the training missions to select the next one. So let's select training mission 2. So let's get out there.
Training Mission 2. Attack a cruiser. Use the targeting computer to destroy the shield generator and then pick off the turrets. Try to hit the engine core for a quick kill. Watch out for enemies warping in. Switch off invulnerability for some quick cash bonuses.
On this second mission, you can already see the universe is filling up with a number of ships, large and small, and certain players of Elite or the new Elite Dangerous game will certainly recognise the scenario on offer. Sometimes we'll have to protect these ships against raiders, sometimes we'll have to blow those up. So there are quite a large number of ships in this game, and you can see I'm having trouble locking onto the enemies there because of the enemy firepower is blasting my craft all over the shop. And with the old 60, it really doesn't help this game because the timings are off. So even though this game plays very smoothly, it's probably worth investing in an all-40 processor to play this at full speed. So I have no idea whether I was supposed to blow that up or not. You can press F5 at any point to take a look at the mission status, and you can also press the C key to center ourselves back on the target. We can change our targets, and the radar will point out where that target is, and the arrow above us shows us if it's below, above or either side of the direction we are currently facing. So lens flares there and other galaxies certainly fill the universe full of atmosphere, and even though this was a primitive game compared to Frontier and things like that, it's certainly a great step up for the Amiga, and is certainly a game that most people have never even heard of. So let's have a look at the full campaign, and from this we can even choose our star glider from a number of Star Wars-esque variants, and you'll have to make use of money as well.
Guyana attack. Guyana has cut off all trade routes to the Confederate homeworld of Briantide. Council Attila has sent a small squad of fighters to the neutral world of Conyaro. Top-fed ships must defend the fleet of cargo ships en route to the planet. The armored fighters are heading in to destroy the cargo in an attempt to weaken the Confederate opposition.
This is commercial tug ship Lyat en route to Conyaro, calling any Confed pilots. We've spotted enemy ships. We must make it to the planet. Please assist.
Money can be gained by destroying ships and completing missions in the X-Wing kind of genre. We can take on all newcomers. You can see planets and galaxies in this fake 3D environment. So this game certainly has a great atmosphere, as I say, in line with the Wing Commander games. So if you like Wing Commander and X-Wing, then check out this on the Amiga. The playability is difficult with the old 60, but I'm sure with an old 40, then the playability and the smoothness of the graphics will really stand up for themselves. and this game is only available on CD, remember, so you'll definitely need an Amiga 1200 or a CD32 to play this. And so even though it isn't up to the very best PC candidates of that time, and it's certainly not as deep as Elite Dangerous, which is just about to be funded on the latest Kickstarter, but I hope you can see the scope of this game and the depth of this game. Certainly stands it above the normal Amiga 3D shooter, so I highly recommend that. Check that game out. So if your idea of a 3D shooter is actually a first-person 3D shooter, then let's check out that category. This is the winner. This is Generic Species, and this was created by Vulcan in 1998. Ever since Doom came out for the PC in 1993, the Amiga seemed rather retro in comparison, and so there were a number of Amiga games in the Doom clone genre, and most people have heard of Gloom and Fears, maybe A Doom, Breathless as well, that was by Power Computing, but for me the best of the entire genre has to be this. This is Generic Species. It has the best graphics, the best sound, the best music, the best playability, and the best atmosphere from all those clones. So if you have a powerful AGA machine, and if you have a graphics card as well, this is certainly the one to check out. And there will be a large number of weapons available in this game, and a massive map to explore. We can even save the game at any point by clicking on these communication panels, and we can change the game engines, the settings, and enter level codes and save our progress up at any point just by connecting to those communication screens. And the levels themselves are pretty linear. All we have to do is destroy all the enemies on the levels, collect any keys necessary to open doors, and to find the exit. It certainly isn't as easy as Doom, but the graphics are certainly up there, maybe even to Doom 2 caliber. And with the light casting and the shadows, the one-to-one pixel rendering, and all the other fancy tricks that the Amiga could only just about pull off, this game certainly delivers that product in high style. So we're still looking for the civilian key, and we know that there is a civilian hidden away in this corner of the map, but let's just get rid of him. This is a technician. He didn't really pose too much of a threat, but that still does not give us the green key. But just to give you an idea of the effects, here's an explosion. Very nicely rendered there, and even the lights which flash on the level, and obviously the robots and all the enemies are rendered, and so this game really makes full use of the full 3D environment. And there we go, we have the green civilian key, which better not blow those up. That gives us the green key that we need to get through to the next section. And we haven't really, well, it says I still need the green key, so let's swap to that. Open the door, and then start shooting again. So we haven't really picked up much ammo from those guys. The guys who you shoot are supposed to drop ammo, and even if they don't, you should be able to find ammo lying around. And we're just activating 2 hidden switches here. Just destroy the guy and then activate those hidden switches to open up another door. And you can see a flying robot there making our life a misery. So let's just get rid of that. So Generic Species is definitely the winner of the 3D shooters round because of its playability, its graphics, its style, its atmosphere, and everything else that you can throw into the pot. The great sound and the great music. The only thing which lets it down is the fact that I've just run out of ammo, which means I cannot complete the level and I cannot get to the exit. Maybe I'm just about to uncover some ammo in an antechamber, but I missed it, and that means it's game over. That's certainly the cream of the crop, so highly recommend that. And on to our next category. This is my favourite category of all time. This is driving games. So if your idea of a 3D driving game is in the Mario Kart style, then perhaps you won't be able to find much better than this on the Amiga. This is Street Racer, and here we get to play in a Mode 7 type environment, and we can race our vehicle around a number of selected tracks. So let's jump into the championship, and to begin with we can only play the Bronze Cup. Once we complete the championship, we can then compete for the other levels of the cup, and we can even choose the player, and each one of these will have their own stats and their own special magic and their own special weapons. So there are pickups and power-ups available in this game, and every character will have their own special power-up as well. In this case it's a flying carpet, so should I choose, I not only can jump in this game, every car can jump, but my special character can use a flying carpet to get ahead of the opposition. But you can see I'm struggling at the moment to gain control of my vehicle. The more the player holds their car left and right, the more that will turn. So if you preempt the bends really early, then the player will gain a really tight turn on that bend, and the more they turn, the tighter the car will go. But if they overcompensate for that, then the car will veer onto the grass and they will find life difficult. So here we are, this is the last lap, and you can see we have gained 1 turbo by driving over that, and you can see we are in position 4 at the moment. All the other players are wreaking havoc around us, and we are veering left and right off that map. It's certainly not easy to stay on the road for any period of time. Still in 4th. And when we get close to those guys, we can also use our sword to knock those guys out and to slap those, hit those from behind. And so we can use melee weapons in this game, and if we finish 3rd or higher, we get to progress to the next level. So that was 3rd, and we even get a number of bonuses in this game. Bonuses for the fastest lap, for the number of punches, and an extra special bonus as well. So if you fight and use your melee weapons, you'll gain extra points. This is level 2. This is a spooky nightmare level, and if you are quick off the draw, you can gain a tremendous fast start, but for some reason I'm struggling to get those starts moving. So the control of this game is difficult to begin with, and the player will find themselves veering off the track pretty rapidly and hitting obstacles like that. But sometimes shortcuts over the grass are possible, and once the player learns the levels, they know just when to veer off and take those shortcuts. You might notice stars on the track. They are bonus power-ups, and you might also notice sticks of dynamite as well, which we shall see later on. This is the last lap, and I'm up to third, well, dropping down to fourth again, having a furious battle for that position. So I'm just going to use a power up to get me through and up into position 1. So this is the last lap, and you can pick up spanners there. You can see the health bar running along the top of the screen. You can pick up spanners to clear away that health, and you can pick up turbos as well. I've used turbo to get myself back up into second, and those turbos will mean crashes are a lot less painful. So fighting to get up there. If I use the last turbo, it gets me up into first position across the line. So the levels in this game are pretty hectic. They are difficult until the player masters the driving control system, but it's not unplayable by any stretch, and the levels can be really fun once you get mixed up into the pack and fists start flying and power-ups start being collected. And if you can get a good start like this, that just makes the game even more fun. And if you like this type of game, I'd certainly recommend Driving Force, which is like this but with power drift kind of ramps that you can raise up and down the level. But fighting among the pack here, I'm just about to pick up the worst item I could pick up, which is dynamite, and here we then have to play tag with all the other players. We have a certain number of seconds to get rid of that thing before it blows up, and just got rid of it there. But you can see this game certainly has great graphics and really smooth playability and really good atmosphere. So anybody who thought Bump and Burn was just too hard for its own good should check this game out. And again, once you get used to the driving controls and holding down fire button there and pulling back will instigate special tricks, and you can see I'm trying every trick in the book here to get past this sumo guy, and he's just about there, but unlucky, second position. On to the next track. So yeah, certainly check out that game if you like Mode 7 type games, and that's probably one of the best on the Amiga. On to our next contender. It's another rarity, and in this case it's Alan Sturgis and his game City Cars. So City Cars is probably the game that I'd create if I was sat in front of Blitz Basic trying to make a driving game. So let's check that out. We can play using the mouse, the joystick or the keyboard, and we can also choose the car. Any level, professional there with 2 F's, so that's a spelling mistake. And then on to the game itself. In this game it's a 1-to-1 challenge, pretty much like Test Drive 2, the duel, and we must outwit and outmaneuver our competitor. All we must do is to get in front of that guy, easier said than done, and remain in front of that guy for the duration of the course. And if we win, we get through to the next level. If we don't, then we don't. We can crash into scenery, we can also go off into rivers and crash into traffic there, and that's certainly a unique part of this game, judging the traffic lights and getting through the traffic. But it won't be too long before we catch up to the other opponent, and the dual aspect certainly gives this game something to aim for, and you might notice the frame rates are pretty speedy as well. So even though this game came out in 1996, this was developed for the Amiga 500, or at least the 000 processor computer. So this is running on an Amiga 500 at the moment, a stock machine with 0.5 meg of memory, and you can see the tremendous speed that the programmer gets out of that engine. And yeah, straight past me there. It seems one of the downsides of this game is no matter how far you get in front of that computer opponent, if you crash at any point, then the computer opponent generally gets in front of you and takes you like you're standing still. So just one crash and that's it. But here we are, this is the end of the first level, complete. And there are quite a number of levels in this game. On to level 2. And on this second level, you'll be reminded of Test Drive 2, the duel again, maybe Lotus 3 perhaps, with these barriers and the cliffs and going through tunnels. And if you screw your eyes real tightly and you know, imagine this as Lotus 3, then it's not too bad. Certainly the frame rates keep the speed of the game running along at a tremendous rate, but I will speed this game up anyway, just to get us through to the next section. And so the graphics are smooth, they are okay graphics, and the fire there is okay. None of these graphics are brilliant, but they are certainly functional, and even the clouds in the sky there. So the programmer certainly has pulled out one or two stops in this game to make it free-flowing and good to play. So that's the next chord completed. The car grips the road, and there is a modicum of handling to these vehicles. On the downside, the car only has 2 gears, and in high gear the car really whines, and players will certainly be reaching for the control knob if they turn the volume up of that engine noise too high. The engine sounds almost like a combination of a scooter mixed with a lawnmower, so the engine noise is absolutely terrible. The explosions are alright, and certainly good enough for this game. And the trees there, they are actually 2D trees made to look like 3D with the scaling sprites. And look at the tremendous speed. This is, you know, for an Amiga 500, the speed that this engine delivers is just incredible. So imagine what this would have looked like on the 040. It would have been so fast it's unplayable. But I died there, lost my last life, and that's my view of city cars. Certainly check that out. On to the next one. If your idea of a 3D driving game is in the isometric 3D, like skid marks, then perhaps this is worth having a look at. This is Aerial Racers. So this came out in 1996, a full 3 years after the skid marks, the original skid marks on the Amiga, and a year after Super Skid Marks appeared on the Amiga. And so you can see the graphics are in that kind of environment, and it even reminds me of Indie Heat to a certain degree, but you can see certain elevation changes will happen on every track, and raised platforms and obstacles will have to be manoeuvred around. The aim is to simply get over the finishing line faster than all the opponents, but unfortunately touching the sides of the track or the grass will slow the player down so much that they will find it impossible to catch up with the rest should they dally too long on those corners. So that meant I came in last on that playthrough, which isn't so very helpful. And so the control of the cars is adequate, and the graphics are certainly well drawn, and the playability certainly is there, and you do gain a number of tracks. There are at least a dozen tracks on this disc, and there were no updates unfortunately, but there are built-in tracks built into this game. So let's load the track. This is the Bouncy Castle, and this contains a number of crossover sections, so let's jump into this to continue the review. Unfortunately, the playability somehow lets it down, even though the physics are very much like skid marks. The car's tyres only just skid, only just grip onto those areas, those tarmac areas. But as I say, touching that scenery, touching the grass at any point, the player will simply be unable to catch up with the rest of the field because they never make any mistakes. So crash through those guys there for the second time. So once again, junctions are to be avoided, but certainly once the player finds themselves last, then their motivation dematerializes, and they will find the longevity of this game suffers as a result. But probably it makes a good 3 or 4 player game. And I'll just mention this as well. This is Automobiles. This isn't on the Lemon Amiga database, and it isn't even on the Hall of Light database either. I made the mistake of choosing 3 players instead of 1, so you won't get to see me against the computer, but up to 3 players can play this game at any one time, and you can see the pre-rendered 3D graphics there make this game extra special in the skid marks kind of vein, so check that public domain title out. But on to our next contender. This is Burnout. And just in case you were wondering, Ali Bumbaye is from the Rumble in the Jungle boxing match and means Ali kill him, which he certainly did. But onto this game itself. It's another 3D game, of course, and you can already see Lightwave has been made full use of to create these introduction screens. And so the aim of this game is rather unique. The player must drive up to 3 other opponents off the screen, and having done so they will gain a win. So to describe what I'm talking about, let's start the tournament. We can choose our vehicle from 1 of 4, and up to 4 players can play this game simultaneously using joystick and keys. So this is the arena itself. I'm playing in yellow at the top of the screen, or should I say I was, because I've already been forced off the screen, and the red player wins. So it's as easy as that. Let me try that again, and this time put more force into it, and unfortunately that didn't work. So that's round 2 and the blue player won. So let's try that again. This time let's put even more force behind it and see if we can't survive and bump those other players off. And I felt sorry for the red player there, but it looks like we can destroy him anyway if we score a number of hits, and that means I'm the winner. So it's a very, very, very shallow game. The premise of simply knocking players off the arena is very limited in its scope, so players may gain a few minutes of enjoyment from that. But let's move on to another contender. This is Desert Racing of BarDos, or BarDos maybe, released in 2005. So just before we get into the game itself, there's just time to view yet another space intro, so fasten that seatbelt. Desert Racing of BarDos was created by Ralf Schmidt in Germany, and it was released in English and in German, and so this game gained a 3.3 rating out of 10 on Lemon Amiga. So is it really so bad? Well, we are just about to find out, and you can change a number of options before we get into the game itself, and probably the most important option is to select our vehicle. There are 4 vehicles on offer, and these range from a desert dune buggy, something that looks like the Batmobile, and finally something that looks like a 1930s Roadster convertible. So let's select that one. And yes, there are loading screens everywhere in this game, but this is the game itself. It runs on a full 3D environment, similar to Shadow of the Third Moon, and we are in front of these other guys at the moment. It really is difficult to handle the car, and the turning circle is sharp, and the other cars are intelligent, and they will drop bombs and everything else in our way to halt our progress. The main problem with this game is colliding with any object will force the player to stop almost dead on the spot, and certainly Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge was keen to do that to players, but in this game stopping on the spot is not helpful because that means we will be unable to catch up to the rest of the players. And desert racing, well, deserts are supposed to be empty, free from trees and plants and bushes and poles and everything else which we should not be able to collide into, but unfortunately this desert is populated by all those things, and so colliding with those is virtually a game over. So all the other guys have now lapped me, and I'll have to pull out all the stops to try and get back to those guys, and colliding with any object will flip me around and prevent me from making any further progress. So you can see the devices floating around the screen there, and the coins which we can pick up to upgrade our ride really don't make any difference in this game if you can't play the game in the first place. You can press escape, and you can change the sensitivity of the vehicle and the camera laziness as well to make play just a little bit easier, but try as I might, I simply couldn't find a winning formula on that game. So the best part is probably these screens. And here's another one. And then finally we get to enter our pathetic score into the highest score table. 4 points there. Not really much point doing that. So the best thing that can be said about this game is that it comes with very highly polished introduction animation screens, and certainly how many more visually attractive 3D, Lightwave 3D animation screens are we going to have to sit through in lieu of a game that is actually playable? I think that's certainly where they made their mistake. And even now we get to the upgrade department, we have enough money to upgrade the engine, but we cannot upgrade it for whatever reason. So certainly this game is heavy on the cream and certainly not enough ice cream, so we need something a little more playable, and for that let's move on to another game. Okay, so Turbo Racer 3D is not the most playable game ever invented, and the Lemon crew only gave this a 3.1 score out of 10 for that very reason. So it's not all bad, but it's not all good either. So let's jump into the game. We can select the music from 2 tracks, and you can see the screen has crashed there, but we can select the speed options between manual gears and automatic. and we can even skip through to various races. So this is the first race. Let's select position mode and go. So on first glance, and if you squint, you might be able to imagine that this is Lotus 4, but on second glance, unfortunately, it isn't. The graphics are well drawn, apart from the huge bitmap sprites of the main cars themselves, and certainly better than City Cars. This game uses full polygon driven 3D, not scaling 2D sprites like City Cars, but unfortunately that means the game runs rather slower, or at least the game engine does in this case. And even though we are in high gear at the moment, apparently travelling 230 kilometers per hour, this feels like we're in low gear, travelling around 30 miles per hour. The scenery is functional, and we'll certainly get to drive through rivers and to hit barrels and avoid rocks, and the trees and the backgrounds are well defined, and even the clouds on the horizon use 16 colours to try and get that effect. But unfortunately the game speed is just beyond a joke. The car handles very easily, and you can more or less knock that thing left and right. But look at this, travelling over those oil patches there means the car veers off the screen, and so you'll see the car either travelling in a straight line on this game, requiring very, very minimal and small manoeuvres to drive, or you will see the car slip sliding off the road and being uncontrollable. So it's either one or the other in this game, and even the jumps there don't allow me to jump over the entirety of that river. At least we can hit cones in this game without stopping dead, so at least that's a good thing. But in general, the action is slow. You have no idea where the opponent players are because there is no radar, and crashing into one obstacle yet again will force those guys to overtake us at high speed, so crashing is not recommended. The handling and the playability is, well, it works, but it only just works. And so anyone who bought this game at full price will have probably felt severely ripped off by this product. It feels rushed and not completed to a satisfactory stage. And look at that, the opponent took me on the line, and you must score at least first or second to win that round, otherwise it's game over. At this point you might be wondering why we're wasting so much time viewing this game. Well, that's particularly because it's rare, but also because it saves you having to play this game and to find this game yourself. I'll save you all that time and trouble. And certainly after this playthrough, nobody in their right mind would want to play this game for more than 5 seconds. So let's grin and bear it and get beyond the rest of the pack and put ourselves into second position. And having gained second position, it's almost impossible to get ourselves up into first position, even though we haven't crashed into anything. It's very, very difficult to get up into first, and having done so, one crash will relegate us down the field again. So this longevity of the game certainly suffers in various respects. And ice on the road there, you can see, just like the oil on the previous track, ice will make us veer off the track uncontrollably. So that's certainly one to watch out for. And let's just speed this game up. Certainly if the played at this speed, which is Lotus speed, it would have been alright. But let's speed this game up even more. If the game played at this speed, which is City Cars speed, then it would have been highly playable and mayhem on wheels. But the game does not play at City Cars speed. Unfortunately, it plays at this speed, and colliding with one object will slow us down to a stop us dead on the spot. And that's why we are on third position, and yet more ice on the road means the road is undrivable, and handling clearly goes out of the window. The best part of the game is the music, but apart from that, certainly avoid this game like the plague, and certainly do not confuse Turbo Racer 3D with our next candidate. This is Flyin High. It was released 1 year before Turbo Racer 3D, and yet it's miles better. Let's take a look. this is the options menu, and from here we can check out our high scores. We can also load a game and save a game at any point. And there are various game settings which we can tweak as well. This is actually the patched version, so this runs with high-res RTG graphics, and we can select the resolution there, and the visibility and the sensitivity of the control. The patched version is highly recommended because the control method has been improved in this patched version, and the control of the game is certainly a lot more playable than the original release. So up to 4 players can play in this game competitively. So at first glance, Flyin High may look similar to Turbo Racer 3D, but it is an improvement over that game in every department. We can collect coins to improve our ride, we can outwit at least more intelligent computer-controlled players, and you can see the graphics engine at least runs as smooth and as fast as it possibly can do. So the playing of this game is relatively easy. Certainly it looks easy if you keep the thing in a straight line on this first course. But the thing that really appeals to me about this game, apart from the handling and the speed, is the fact that it really is fun and highly playable. So let's skip through. This is the end of the first track, and you can see colliding with the cones there, or any of the barriers, will slow us down. Not as much as Turbo Racer 3D slowed us down, and we'll skid and slip slide around the track. But let's fast forward our way around the first level, and it's relatively easy in this game, and it should mean we come through the line in first position. And we even get to see our best times on each of the courses, and the game was even released with 2 Datadisc courses discs afterwards, so there are no shortages of courses in this game. And so the courses do change from level to level, maybe not very significantly, but they do change. So let's save our cash in the shop and check out the second course on this game disc. And this time we are further into the city, and we are ahead of those guys because we won the last race. So you can see the trees in this level. There is another tree there, and even though the pop-up is a bit of a problem, the pop-up certainly doesn't slow down the graphics engine down too much, and that's a good thing. But it certainly bears repeating that this is the patched version with the best playability and the best graphics. If you gain the unpatched version, you'll find this game is unplayable, and even the patched version only gained a 5.5 on the Lemon Amiga forums, so even this game is not very well received. The main criticisms were the fact that the enemy opponents on the unpatched version are so hard that they are impossible, and on the patched version they are so easy it's a joke. But certainly the handling has been improved in the patched version, so only get the patched version if you are going to play this game. This is the shop. We have nearly 5,000 in our pocket, so let's burn a hole through that. By using these arrows we can change the item that we wish to buy. We can buy non-slip tyres and slick tyres, but for this I'll buy the engine, and I can just about afford the turbo as well, and not much else at this point. But with an engine and a turbo, certainly this game should run just a little bit faster, so let's check it out. And so yes, this game runs even more quickly with those add-ons and avoiding those cones there. It's surprising that a cone in the middle of the road will stop the player almost dead, and we can't knock those cones over. Unfortunately, that's a silly aspect of the game. Look at this. We can actually power slide our way around corners. Maybe not as good as Outrun 2 SP or other games in that power slide ilk. This is certainly no Need for Speed Underground, but power sliding, even in this stage of the 90s, was a rarity, so you've got to give them credit for that. And So even though this game is certainly not the best driving game on the Amiga, it certainly is rare and it's playable, and it was released very late. By 1997 the Amiga was certainly behind the PC, and this is Grand Prix 3, released in 1998, the year later. So you can see the PC had already overtaken the Amiga for graphics by this stage, and the PC's Super VGA graphics cards certainly making mincemeat from this game. Could the Amiga even rival a game like this? Well, you may be surprised. The only thing I can offer you to rival something like that is this. This is Virtual Grand Prix, released in 1999. Was a homemade Grand Prix game, which is probably the closest the Amiga ever got to a full all singing, all dancing, fully 3D racing game beyond Sir Jeff Cramond's Formula 1 Grand Prix 1. And we get to play a number of tracks. These include
Melbourne, Imola, Hungaroring, Magny-Cours, Interlagos, Hockenheim, Nuremberg Ring,
and
Barcelona.
Each one even comes with its own track guide.
Barcelona is all about choice of tyre. It is crucial to have a balanced car. The track's combination of long flowing corners and its slow speed section will catch out any team that hasn't prepared. Wearing the left front tyre is the usual concern, but the overall setup front to back is vital.
From there we can select the play mode, and I'll choose free practice for this. That takes us onto the pits.
Option.
By clicking onto the computer, we can change the
game option. Input type.
The joystick is already selected there, and this game is certainly fully compatible with an analog stick, and we can calibrate the analog joystick there and change the steering sensitivity. That's the top option.
Help. Fake downforce.
You can even change the fake downforce and add some fake downforce to that.
Car's damage.
Turn on and off car damage as well. You can also turn on the racing line and adjust the transmission, and that's enough of those.
Game option.
And then it's time to tweak the car with the
setup menu. Tyres compound.
Let's switch to the soft tyres, and we can also change
chassis, camber,
and
front spring, front shocks, rear spring, rear shocks, anti-rolling bars, brake balancing.
And it's certainly important to tweak these options to your heart's content to make the game playable.
Wings, front spoiler, rear spoiler,
even the wings and the gear ratios.
Gearbox.
And because this game was developed in 98 through 99, you will also find extra things like
Refueling.
and all these little bits and pieces will make a difference to the result of your driving abilities in the game. So let's click on the car and we can look left and look right, which is a feature of modern Grand Prix simulators. So let's take her out. This is Barcelona and this is one or two corners, and just moving the stick left and right just a little bit, the look around corners mechanism makes that viewing display rather wobbly, but apart from that you can see the high res graphics there really do work on the Amiga. But one of the criticisms of this game was that it certainly wasn't play tested enough, and so you'll find the handling leaves a lot to be desired. Luckily we can press the tab key at any point to reset the car back in the right direction and somewhere near the track, so the tab key is certainly useful there. But as we approach Fiat Corner, you will certainly see how the playtesting certainly lets this game down. This is a third leading onto a fourth gear corner, and as you can see I'm in first and the car just will not turn enough around that corner. So let's head on down to Repsol, which is a first gear corner, 75 miles per hour. But even though I am in first, and even though I have geared down to that, full lock on left, still full lock on left, still full lock on left, the car just will not turn, and this track in this game is broken because of that factor. So, because of that, a fan of the game released a patch to update the game to 1.0D, and that patch improves the car handling and its ability to stick to the road, and also comes with an arcade mode, which is what we'll be checking out right now.
Monza.
Monza is the fastest track of all, and as such requires an extremely low downforce setup. At the same time, however, all the corners bar the chicanes are high speed ones, so a good balance and a high level of mechanical grip from the tyres are essential. The brakes are also subjected to a real hammering.
So some of the tracks in this game don't work, and some of the tracks in this game do work. So we'll be visiting Monza right now, which is probably the most playable track in the entire game. And so we find fewer options here because this is the arcade mode, and we can still add some fake downforce there, but if we take a look at the game tweaks, we'll find very much fewer game tweaks in there. So let's click on where the car should be. I'm going to press F2 to get rid of the look left and right, and F9 to turn on the full screen telemetry. The environment is very well coded in this game, and certainly putting one wheel on the grass is nothing that should be recommended, because the grass will certainly spin the car out and control will be lost. So avoid the grass. But you can see the playability and the handling have certainly been improved with this patch, and the speed, it's a little bit easier on the eye if you turn off the look left and right feature, certainly less jerky. But you can see that Virtual Grand Prix plays pretty well. It's certainly got great graphics and great sound, and if the handling was just that bit better, I'd certainly recommend this game as being an absolute beater on the Amiga. But because there are a number of problems still remaining in the game, it's just not quite up to the gold standard of playability that we'd expect from games such as this. But you can see I'm really racking up the field there, and sometimes it's easier to let those other guys through rather than have a crash. And we'll be taking a full lap of Monza, so avoid that grass there. And even the rear view mirrors work on this game. We're just about to come to the famous Parabolica. Let's just sneak past these guys and see if we can get through. No, but let's keep up the pace and let's try and get them on the exit to the Parabolica, and avoid that grass. And oh, just touch wheels there, and bang. That's certainly a view you don't see every day, but that's one full lap of Monza completed. But I hope from this you can gain some kind of idea of the capabilities of our lovely machine. And just to finalise that thought, here we are with the FPS turned off, and with the old 60, no frames per second limits really means this game shifts at full speed. So just like the F1 GP review, we'll be seeing this at full frame rate, full speed. And so this was what the Amiga was capable of given 200 megahertz or a very fast CPU with the frames per second off. And incredibly lucky there to still make that chicane, but oh, touching the grass and it's all over. And you can even choose to drive in reverse, but let's put that into first gear and set off. These are the capabilities of your Amiga, and with the graphics card and some decent CPUs, I'm sure the Amiga could have produced more games like that. On to the next section, and it's the last section we will cover. It's the Empire Builders. So let's start this one off with Foundation. So this game builds upon the style of the Settlers, and if you thought the Settlers was the only game of this type on the Amiga, then I'm happy to introduce you to an alternative. This game was produced in 1998, while the Settlers was released in 1993. We can choose to tweak the game a little bit in the options, but let's leave those as default for now and check out the game itself. Here are the credits, and it's easy enough to get lost in these credit screens because if you press back they will flip between each other. So let's click on exit. There's certainly a lot of people involved with this game, and so let's have a look at the conquest. There is only one main conquest in this game, but there were updates. Foundation Gold appeared in 2000 along with the Director's Cut and Foundation The Undiscovered Lands. So there were updates and expansions to this game, and each level is played on an island which we can preview. In this case we need 40 gold, 40 wood and 40 steel to be able to complete the level. Just like the Settlers, the game will require us to chop down trees and process wood and mine metals out of the ground and produce ore, and so once all those reaches 40 we'll complete the level. We can click on those flags and they will reveal building places, building spots, and so we can choose to build a building in the available space. And to begin with we can only build near our main castle, but as we expand our territory we can build further afield, and so the yellow flags show where big buildings can go, and the blue ones show where low level smaller buildings can go, and the black flags show where mines can go. And I can even build a crematorium there and an armory and things to build up our weaponry and our soldiers. But in this early demo all we need to do is to build a number of woodcutters, and that will allow us to chop down all these trees. You can see right at the bottom of the screen we have a number of icons. We have 15 gold, 15 wood, 12 coal, 26 steel, and those figures will decrease as we build things and increase as we gain those items. You can see I've just built a woodcutter there, a forester, which will help to maintain the forest and the permaculture. So let's set up our first mine in this location and see what that turns out. But the houses in this game don't take that long to build. You don't have to produce paths and get equipment handed around from guy to guy, so the speed of this game is pretty quick compared to Settlers, even though the navigation and all those icons on the icon bar make navigating around this game and handling the game a lot more complicated. but certainly anyone who's played the Settlers will have a leg up when trying to understand this game, and it's pretty similar. The gold can be used to fortify our defences, and our knights will fight for that gold, and you can see a knight there just about to walk into that building. So we do have armies and battles do occur in this game, so it's always good to plan ahead and try and get as much territory as possible early on in the game, and then if any towns or territory is captured, that means we can survive, and we can even choose to click on our individual players and give them commands.
Well, hello.
How you diddling?
Can I help you?
Hello. Okay.
And a large number of voice actors have been used so that every character is different in the game, and so we can instruct characters to pick up items lying around the field and to bring those home to the main mansion. And so we can certainly watch as our amenities grow and our population as well, and we can check out our citizens. But looking at the knight and the woman there, they get together and increase our population. We are out of ore. Oh dear, it means we must build more mines. But that's Foundation, great graphics, great playability, and that contrasts heavily with our next game. This is Red Mars. So Red Mars was released in 1999 and was developed by a Polish team. So you'll find many teams from all over the world in these games that you've never even heard of. But unfortunately, belying that wonderful introduction and that great soundtrack, you'll find the main game is as shallow as a puddle, and it's as playable as a very unplayable thing. So we have a number of miners who can mine, technicians who can build things and repair things, and we also have a main construction unit, the main block on the bottom of the screen. And in this game we play in turns, so you will only be able to move each thing a number of turns before that turn is used up, and then it's turn over. So we can build a small number of items to begin with, none of which makes particularly any sense unless you have the manual, and if there are any rocks on this planet's surface, we will have to build around those rocks. As you can see, it's not very friendly when it comes to building, but we can click on these items at the bottom. These are actually mineral deposits, and each one of those, platinum, gold, copper, tin, they will indicate the best places to mine on this Martian surface, and so we can get those miners in there and start mining and start building. So the idea of the game is simply to mine minerals from the surrounding desert, the Martian landscape, and having mined a lot, we can expand our territory and we can build things and afford new things. So it's a typical empire builder, but as you can see, I'm not having much luck there avoiding that rock. Let's just build something. We can even name our building, but since I have no idea what this building is, I won't bother. But it's under construction and it will take 2 turns to get that building built. So while we wait for that thing to happen, we can set our miners to prospect areas, to go to different areas and to follow different miners around. So let's just move our forces closer together, and the map there on the right certainly shows us we have a lot of territory to cover in the game. So let's just move on through. This is the Pioneer craft, and this is the fastest thing that we have at the moment. Again, it requires a number of turns, and it's a turn-based machine, and we're still waiting for those buildings to be built. We can even inspect our armies and customize our drilling equipment and build our own drilling machines, and the computer will rate us, give us a rating for our machine building skills. But to be honest, this game is dire, and I wouldn't recommend this game to anybody. It's certainly rare, but not as good as it could have been. Let's move on to our next game. This is Moonbases. This was developed by Homegrown Software, a UK-based team in 1999, and their only other game was Mystery Fish, which is equally rare if you can find that. But Moonbases is another Dune 2 clone, and even though the graphics are immediately simplified over our previous candidate, they are even better at least. And these sprites may be big and chunky, and that icon bar at the bottom there is certainly low-fi. Controlling the game and manoeuvring these characters is much easier. Look at that AI. I don't think the AI is particularly well done in this game, but while the enemies are being distracted, let's march in there and figure out how to destroy those guys before they destroy me. And so we will be attacked in this game straight from square one, and there is an enemy base somewhere on the moon, and so the aim is to build our base as quickly as possible, to manufacture as many arms and as much defensive capabilities as possible, and then set off with our weaponry and attack the other base. The higher of the two icons bars allows us to customize our moon base, and the one with the satellite dish there is actually a radar unit which has opened up our map. And you can see in the far bottom left corner we are in red on that map, and if we should click on or scroll down to the enemy, they're in green, and they start off pretty small as well. It's a very much simplified version of Dune 2. Somehow it isn't particularly easy to play, but in no time at all, it won't be very long before the player builds himself a massive moon base and get all those defensive craft you can see at the bottom built. So the game is certainly okay and playable, but for my money, the best game and the winner of this section is called Napalm. And in this game we can either play as the robots or the humans, so for this I will be choosing the humans.
You will be facing the robots' army led by their leaders Volgard.
So Napalm is probably the best Dune 2 clone, or the best Command & Conquer clone on the Amiga, and the graphics are super high res, and everything about this game is super professional, and it really does work really quickly on the old 60. In fact, so quick in fact that I'm going to have to slow the game down So let's change the game speed to around 7, which I find is good on the L60. We can even change the scroll response so that it doesn't scroll quite as quickly. And on this first training mission, all we need to do is to traverse the landscape, and if we find any enemies we can click on those to get rid of them, and the cursor will change to red, and all the players that we have selected will then fight the enemy and attack that head on. We can also click on individual characters and use those to attack the player, and one rocket launcher there from a bazooka wielding guy is enough to defeat the enemy. There are only maybe half a dozen enemies on this level, and the aim is simply to find the exit, which is the enemy base itself. And the enemy base is somewhere in this top corner. It's very lightly defended, so it won't be very long before we get rid of that. But look at that, one streak of flame has got rid of my jeep. So let's get rid of that flamethrower guy and use our militia to get rid of the rest. The aim of this first mission is to take down the enemy base. So first of all, we must get rid of all these guys that are protecting the enemy base one way or another, and that leaves us with relatively few guys, to be honest. But now that the base has now been cleared, we can leave those guys to soften that up. And let's go back and find this guy. He's an engineer, and this is another engineer. We've given 2 engineers on this level, and they work pretty similarly to the saboteurs on Dune 2. If you should get one of those guys to walk into an enemy building, they will lay a bomb and help to blow that up. But you can see the enemy building is collapsing there, and that means if I should get the engineer to walk in, you can see the green arrows there, that means we can then capture that base for ourselves, and we can also capture oil drilling machines and oil refineries, and capture those and steal those from the enemy in the same manner. So that's the mission completed.
The enemy is enraged by your successful raid. Our intelligence shows that significant armored and infantry forces are on their way to crush our newly established base.
From level 2 onwards, we get to build buildings. The aim of this second mission is to simply survive an attack, and so 15 or 20 enemy vehicles will soon be riding over the horizon to blow us away. If we are good and tactical with our survivability skills, we should be able to survive that attack. And if not, we can always construct a barracks and turn out more of our friendly soldiers to defend our complex on this island. But let's just skip forward to level 4. Level 3 is basically a firefight where we have to construct maybe 30, 40 or 50 of our friendly units, of our tanks, to take on the enemy and to blow those up in a massive firefight, whereas mission 4 is rather more tactical. You can see the large craft there at the top of the screen. That's actually a drilling mechanism, and that will drill an oil well over a patch where we find oil reserves. And so if we send out units to recce the area, we should soon find an oil patch on the floor, and there it is. That's the first oil patch. All you need to do is to guide the machine into that oil and it will build a well, and then we must construct a refinery, and that will start our accumulation of cash. The cash in this case is highlighted in the very top right corner just above the globe, and so we have just enough cash to start us off. And certainly the oil well will have to be mined, but if we should take a look higher up at the screen, we can see our scouts have found an extra oil well there. So with a bit of luck and some patience, even though we only have one drilling machine and we cannot construct any more at this stage, with a little ingenuity we should be able to mine both of those oil reserves while we play this game. And we cannot chop down the trees, unfortunately, so placing our equipment is a matter of clearing the area first and maybe stretching out our complex into areas which do not contain trees. But you can see I've just constructed our first refinery, so we gain an oil tanker from that refinery, clicking on the oil tanker and clicking on the well with the 2 arrows means the tanker will gain all the oil from that oil well, and you should take that back to the refinery. But look at that, the enemy has now sunk its own oil well. So unless we recapture that position, the enemy will steal all the oil from that reserve and will rob us of money that we need to get constructing our base. So just like mission 1, let's send up an engineer to that location and move a few tanks in to soften that up, and then hopefully we can send in our engineer and recapture that oil well. Every single unit in the game will have an orange bar above it, and the tanks and defences will each have an orange bar that indicates the energy of that unit. We can repair the buildings by clicking with the right mouse button, and that will highlight a spanner icon, and then clicking the spanner on building will repair it. But we cannot repair any vehicles at this stage because we have not created the vehicle repair shop. But by sending the engineer in there, you can see that we have now captured that unit. So if I now repair it, right click and spanner that icon up, we can then repair that unit to get the red bar all the way back up to the orange, and you can see it moving up there slowly. And now all we need to do is to build a refinery, and we can start that money rolling in. As you can hopefully see already, the graphics and the playability of this game are here in spades, and the sound effects and the music really add to the atmosphere. So this certainly is one of the few games which might be a June 2 beta, certainly on the Amiga, and it has all the usual features that you will find in an empire builder, and we can build not only solar powered energy units, but we can also build nuclear units as well, which should provide more power for our complex. But again, very difficult to plant the buildings in there because of all the trees, so it can be helpful to move all our units away from that location, and that allows space to build. And so now we have 2 oil refineries and 2 oil wells. It shouldn't be long before we accrue enough money to build the rest of our base. And you can see after the first few buildings have been built, we can build barracks and a radar outpost, refineries and storage silos, and we can also create a fake headquarters as well, and that might divert enemy attention away from the actual headquarters. You can see the enemy is always keen to take pot shots at our base, so that's why those tanks are up there to defend the oil well. Otherwise the enemy will be keen to capture all our equipment and our bases. And that's the barracks built, that odd shaped building, and I'm just clicking on the light weapons factory now so that I can start to build tanks. And the building in this game is generally rather quick, and so I'm going to click on the guy there to start that build, and the light weapons factory there, the light vehicle factory, I can then click on those things. Look at that tank there, really making life a misery with those hit and run tactics. But by clicking on that thing we can now build a tank, and we also have a research and development building as well which we can build, and that hopefully, particularly later on, not on this stage but later on, that will allow us to build different types of tanks and lots of defence weaponry, ground guns, flamethrowers. So even though the number of buildings and the number of units on offer isn't maybe as much as June 2, there is certainly enough on offer to make this a very deep game. So I'm just about to drop a radar outpost there. That's the very strange shaped building you can see at the bottom. I have 2 solar powered energy gatherers, and so that will just about give us enough to power a local map, which you can see in the top right corner. And we can't see much of that map at the moment, basically because we haven't done enough exploring to reveal most of the map, and we haven't got enough power in those energy generators to power the whole map to be visible. But now that we have the map on screen, we can use that to direct our troops and our forces to specific locations. So we can now use the main play field to move those items around, or we can simply click on the map. You can also see to the right I'm busy building more tanks and more bazooka guys. So skipping through the level, we find we've now accrued an army of bazooka guys there at the bottom, who I've lined up to defend the south entrance to our complex. And we've certainly seen hit and run tactics from the enemy, so having those guys lying in wait certainly has its advantages. And I'm just placing a research centre there, which doesn't do much on this level, but it will do on later levels. And the tanks you can see rolling out of the light vehicle factory there. I've managed to accrue a number of tanks, so I'm just about to gather those together and form my very first battalion, and then we can send that into battle. You might notice I've built 2 light weapons factories on this game, but unfortunately the game will only let you build 1 vehicle or 1 army unit at a time. So even though we have 2 factories, we can only produce 1 tank at a time. So having 9 or 10 weapons factories all built together is certainly not recommended, because that will not increase volume and productivity in the game. But thankfully we can use the left mouse button to drag it across a selected number of our guys, and that will build into a team. And now that we have a squad, or at least a couple of squads together, a forwarding team and a backup team there, you can see. So I'm going to send my forwarding guys to take out this tank going in the pass, and on the other side of this pass the enemy base won't be very far away. So let's sneak behind the enemy radar before we get attacked, and before they discover us. We'll send the tanks in first of all, and then the bazooka guys, the rocket launchers, can come in and clean up the mess from behind. So leaving a number of tanks there to defend our base. Never ever ever leave the base undefended, because it will be attacked. And we are using these tanks to take on the northern route. There are only 2 routes to the enemy base, the northern route and the southern route. And you can see this bazooka guy there is sneaking around the hills, and so we have some ground guns to take out there. So if we select all our guys and click the object that we want to destroy, that will turn into a red reticule, and you can see I'm blowing up that thing at the moment. The enemy can reconstruct their facilities and their defences just like in Dune 2. So if you find the energy bar of a building is being raised, that is the enemy trying to repair its own buildings as you destroy them. So that's the first unit, and let's send in the reinforcements since the bulk of that first unit has been destroyed. But to be honest, this game really loves lots and lots of units to be available on the battlefield, and sending in this crew is only just enough to start a minor skirmish. Probably 20 or 30 tanks is recommended to start a battle, and maybe 50 tanks if you can accrue those and send those in. Maybe 50 tanks is enough to destroy the entire base. So I'm not going to get very far with this. Let's send in the tanks to try and create a pincer movement and meet myself in the middle, and hopefully those tanks will get through to me and those rocket launchers. But the AI in this game isn't particularly very good. They did release a number of patches to the game, and certainly with the latest patch the AI was improved a little bit, and a couple of bug fixes. So I'm still bogged down trying to get rid of that refinery in the south, and the guys in the north, even though they are destroying tanks, we haven't quite got them together, and I'm being murdered here. I'm being slaughtered by the ground guns. So it's retreat, unfortunately. I haven't really got very far in the game, certainly not very far into the enemy's base. I need a lot more tanks than that, but this is just to show you how the level would progress. And sometimes if you can leave these rocket launcher guys to take down these silos, sometimes the enemy won't notice those and will allow them to take down defences behind its back. But here's my second squad. I built a number of tanks, again a very small number of tanks. I'd certainly recommend twice this many if you want to take on the enemy's defences. But this is a heavy weapons factory, and from here all kinds of heavy vehicles will pour out. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong angle to to attack this base, and I'm being pelted by ground guns and by missiles as well. And even though we have some backup units there, it won't be long before I'm blown to smithereens and defeated. So if you have 16 megabytes fast RAM, the AGA chipset, and at least an 020 Amiga, I'd certainly recommend you check out Napalm. So that brings us to the end of this almost 4-hour review of the top 10 games that you've probably never even heard of, and I hope you guys have come across a number of games that you've never heard of with a view to checking those out. And so thanks for viewing this play guide, and hopefully I'll see you again in the new year with more play guides and reviews. Thank you.